All right. On behalf of the LOC and the SOC, it is my pleasure to welcome all of you to the Bauges 2022 conference. Today, we will start with 4 very exciting review talks, but before we go to this, I want to highlight a few important aspects on behalf of the main organizers that you can see on your screen: Elena Valenti, Francesca Frangudi, Anita Zanella, and Lodovico Coccato. And I want to start with sharing a short story, actually, that explains how we all ended up here today. It all started about 4 years ago. It was spring morning in 2018 at the cafeteria at ISO. And at that moment, Elena saw me in the cafeteria and she came to me and she said something like, you know what? The Milky Way community and the extragalactic community have a hard time understanding each other. And she said, I want to organize a conference where we bring together these two communities and we make them talk to each other and discuss their results together and try to understand each other better. And then she asked me, would you help me with that? And I said, yes. And here we are today, 4 years later. Of course, we have added 2 other important communities to this discussion, not only the extragalactic and the Milky Way community, but also the high redshift community and the theory community. And of course, some of us belong to more than one of these communities to discuss this very complex central region of these galaxies. And I share this story because this highlights one of the main goals of this conference, which is indeed for us to talk and to discuss across these different communities. So to bring together these 4 different communities and make sure that we learn from each other, we learn the developments that are happening in the different fields, and we understand as well the different developments. And this is not so straightforward because not always the concepts we use are the same. The techniques that we use are also not always the same. And sometimes it's difficult to understand. The vocabulary can be also different. And sometimes it's difficult to understand what the other communities are doing and how they are progressing. So this is the main goal of this conference, I would say, and I'll get back to this in a minute. I also want to talk about, of course, the fact that we had to postpone this meeting 2 times, as you all know, and even so, we ended up doing a fully online conference. I still think this was the best decision. But of course, I understand that this is a bit frustrating to all of us. Of course, all of us wanted to meet in person with you and share this fascination we have for this topic in person, and we cannot do this. But there are some positive aspects that I will mention. And I'm pretty sure also that there is even more frustration to some of you because we were not able to accommodate poster presentations. I think we haven't yet found out as a community how to accommodate poster presentations in a fully online meeting in a way that is productive and fruitful to everyone. So we did not include this, and I know that many of you wanted to give a talk, or present a poster, but that could not happen. In this context, the pressure factor we had for the talks was a factor 3. So there was a pretty healthy competition for talks. This is the average pressure factor on the VOT. So, but the positive aspects of going fully online are, first of all, I'm not even going to mention the environmental aspects, but first of all, the conference became a lot more inclusive. We have more than 230 registered participants. And of course, many of you will not be able to participate in person if we didn't have like a fully online conference. The other thing is that the quality of the contributed talks is great, and we kind of realized that this would be the case when we got the abstracts, but it was also very nice just to watch the talks and see how fantastic these contributed talks are. And they now are all recorded, which means that they are a resource, they're a very important resource to all of us to learn from each other. So these are the positive aspects. And on the other hand, we also have been doing online meetings for 2 years now. So we have tools that we can use in a way that we can have the discussions that we aim at from the beginning. So you would have a chance to voice your perspectives, to ask your questions and answer questions, either in the live sessions on Zoom. We have 4 discussion sessions where everyone can talk. We also have Slack, where you can ask questions offline, and then anyone can reply when is the best time for them. So we definitely have the means to have the discussions that achieve the goals that we wanted to achieve, even though we are not meeting in person. That's the main message I want to say. And coming back to this goal, this need for discussion, I urge you to ask your questions and use Slack, because this indeed is the main goal of the conference. And I want to point out, in fact, that the very concept of bulge is not common to all of us here. So there is space for a lot of misunderstanding, and that's the things that we should aim at clarify to each other when we are talking about bulge. What do we mean by the bulge, for example? And we should focus on physical properties of the stellar systems, on the physics of the formation processes of the stellar physics, so on the physics itself. I think this is more important, rather than using names that can be confusing and not used in the same way by different communities. So to conclude, I have a couple of housekeeping comments to make before we start. The first one is that every ESO meeting has to abide to the code of conduct. The code of conduct is in the quick links in our web pages, and we expect that everyone is treated with the utmost respect in this conference. If you witness a violation of the code of conduct, you can privately contact myself or Elena, and we will move forward with after talking with you if you see anything wrong. The other thing is about good practice using Zoom. So just to mention that we will prefer that you ask your questions at the end of the talks. And there are 3 different ways in which you can ask your question. You can raise your hand in Zoom if you want to ask your question yourself at the end of the talk. We will unmute yourself, because you cannot unmute yourself now, but we will unmute yourself if you raise your hand. And then if you want, you can turn on your camera and ask the question yourself. If you prefer that the chair asks the question, you can write your question in the chat of Zoom. And if you prefer, you can also ask your question in Slack, and we will read your question as well. And you can always, of course, ask questions in Slack afterwards. You can tag the speaker, you can tag contributed speakers as well, and ask questions on Slack. Finally, I have to say that, as you have seen, we are recording these sessions, these live sessions. So by staying on the session, you agree that you're being recorded. And if you don't want to show in the recordings, of course, you should simply not turn on your camera. I think this is all I had to say for this introduction. I'm sure you all want to hear Simon Driver as our first review speaker. And with that, I will give the floor to our chair of the session, which is Anita